Okay, the recirculation is done, and I've put the lid back onto my mash tun to keep the heat in there, and I've opened up the valve here. It's no longer pumping, it's just coming out gravity fed, although come to think of it, I could speed it up a bit and turn the pump on, so that's what I will do. And now it's draining out the sweet wort. That's what you call the sweet wort. It's just draining it out of here, rinsing all the sugars out of the grain. The sugars have been converted, the starches have been converted to sugar by the mashing process that we just went through. We're going to drain this out, fill the bucket, then we'll fill the mash tun with water again, give it another stir, give it another recirculation, and then we'll drain it out and fill that bucket. After the two of them are filled, all of the sweet wort will go into our kettle and we will start to boil the wort. Now, just out of curiosity's sake, I'll show you now. You can see the liquid level has dropped below the surface of the grain and the grain bed is exposed. That's what it looks like at this point. Nothing too exciting, but I figured I'd show it anyway. Now, if you want, where this is 100% wheat, and I think I will do this, is preserve some of the spent grain at the end and make some bread with it. It is spent, so that a lot of the goodness is gone out of it, but I don't have 100% efficiency, so I can make some, use this as part of my recipe in a half-decent bread. Okay, that bucket is full, so I've taken the pump inlet off of the mash tun. I've moved it back over to the hot liquor tank, and I'm going to pump more water into here to fill it back up again. So, and away we go, filling it back up with water once again. Just simply pumping out of there and into here. We'll fill it back up, then we'll give it another stir, and then we'll recirculate again, and then run it off into the other bucket. Okay, we filled it up and we stirred it. I wasn't able to film the stirring because I only have two hands. And now we have the pump inlet coming from the mash tun again, and we are recirculating, basically out the bottom, through the pump, and back up into the top. And the wort will slowly start to clarify here as we recirculate. The goal is to just simply take some of the cloudiness out of the wort, as we mentioned the last time we were circulating. When we're done circulating, we will drain it into the second bucket. Okay, we're done recirculating that. You can see that it's now running off. The wort is just gravity flowing out of the tun into the bucket. There is a little bit of hot water left in here. I'm just going to dump that out, and then we'll put the full bucket of wort into here and turn on our controller again to start the boil. Okay, the buckets I was using before are going to be my fermenters. Now, one thing you may have noticed up until now is that I have not mentioned a single word about sanitation, even though sanitation is probably the most important factor in making good beer. The reason for this is simple. Up until this point, everything we do eventually goes into that kettle over there and gets boiled. So sanitation up until this point isn't quite as important. This is called the hot side of your brewery. And on the hot side, as long as things are visibly clean, you are okay. You don't have to be anally retentive. Now, when it comes to the cold side of your brewery, after the wort comes out of the wort chiller and into this fermenter, we have to be very anally retentive about sanitation. So in this bucket, I have a sanitizing agent called Star San. It is made by 5 Star Chemicals in the US, and you can store it over long periods, fortunately. I replenish mine once a year, and I'm just about due to replenish this one. I am going to put that into this bucket, give it a good shake because it foams up really well, and the foam is sanitizing as well, and then I will use that agent to sanitize my fermenter. Okay, the part you missed because I only have 2 hands is that I put about this much Star San in the bucket. I sealed the lid. I gave it a really good shake back and forth, which foams it up. So right now it's probably filled up to here with foam. Then I flip it over on its top and let it soak this way for about 5 minutes. The contact time for Star San is only about 2 minutes. Some people say 1 minute. So a good 5-minute soak will be very sufficient to sanitize that very well. And then I'll flip the bucket, over and let it sit for 5 minutes so it'll get all the bottom part and so forth. And by this means I've been doing it this way for 5 or 6 years now and have not had a problem with this sanitation regime. So back to the boiler, you may or may not be able to notice this, but there's a very thick foam building up there. I've got the controller set to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and I just let it come up basically just below boiling temperature. And what happens is that a lot of protein gets forced to the surface, and the protein can make for hazy beer. You do want some protein, of course, to make head on your beer, but too much and it can make hazy beer. So what I do is I skim the protein off the top and I collect it. You could toss it away, but I like to collect it into a bin like this because if you collect enough you can get maybe 500 milliliters of liquid in the end, and it is really, really yummy to drink. It's like a malted milkshake, really, honestly and truly. So I just like to skim and skim and skim while it's coming up to temperature, and then once this fills up we will dump it in here, let it come up to temperature again, let more of the foam build up, and I will just keep skimming and skimming. I like to take my time while I'm brewing. I'm not in a hurry to finish the brew day, so this is one of the things that I do. Okay, we've got it all filled up with wort at this point in time. We are just waiting for the controller to bring it up to 200 degrees. As more protein forms, I will skim it, and I've already fetched the hops out of my freezer to add to it once it starts boiling. Now, there's the yeast starter that I'm going to use in this beer. Hefeweizen requires a very particular type of yeast to give it the special flavor that it has. So I buy these vials from a company called White Labs in the US, and it comes with yeast in it. I add the vial to some starter wort, which is basically just the output of my fermenter from a previous batch that I can up in my pressure canner. And you see it ferments out, and you can see the layer of yeast on the bottom there. That's what I'm after, is that layer of yeast. When it's time to pitch this later on today, I will add it to the wort, but before I do so, I will reclaim some to fill my vial back up again. I've sanitized the vial in my Star San. I will fill the vial back up and store it in the fridge until the next time I need it, and I can use what's left in the vial to inoculate a starter for my next batch. And you can do that 6 or 7 times without a microscope or anything like that before you have to worry about infection or off flavors or whatever, as long as you're following sanitary procedures the whole way. So we've got lots of protein forming here, and I am just going to start skimming it away. There we go. All that protein is so delicious and actually quite nutritious, as you can imagine. Okay, my wort is now at the preset temperature that I had set. Normally I will leave it here a little bit longer and do a little bit more skimming, but I've already skimmed a fair bit, so I am going to switch over to manual mode, if I can figure it out here. I think it's just that. Well, I'll turn it off and back on, and it'll come up in manual mode. And what I will do is dial in my... I know that on a good summer day it takes about 26% to maintain a boil, so I will dial in about 29% right now, which should get me to a good boil. This is really a pain. I wish I had a different way of setting this. It takes quite a long time to get me up to the right percentage. I'm sure that somewhere in the manual for this thing there is an explanation of how to get around this problem, but as you can see, it's going to take me a while to get up to my 29%. There, I saved you the wait. I turned off the camera, and now we were just about at our 29. I'll put it on 30, 30% I guess. We'll see where we get. We may have to turn it down a little bit if the kettle is boiling too vigorously. We will come back in and turn it down.